Hello and welcome to Big Video 2 Electric Boogaloo, where, as you can tell by the title and the thumbnail, I'm going to be talking about Star Trek. Why? Well, as you know, I love Star Trek. I mean, I've done over 60 videos about Star Trek over the past near 3 years that I've been on this channel, and I'm also a lover of video games. Star Trek does have video games about it, going all the way back as far as these late 70s to early 70s for some of their games. Some arcade games that got like ported over to the Atari 2600, the 5800, Coleco, and all that stuff. So in this video, I'm going to see if any of them are actually any good, because usually when it comes to licensed tie-in games, they don't go well. Now, I'm not going to be reviewing every single Star Trek game that has ever existed, because one, I don't have the funds for it. Two, I don't have the equipment to record it. And three, I want this video out sometime this century. Now, this actually isn't the original intro that I recorded for this video. I decided to change it after the fact that I know now what the actual goal for the video is, even though I'm nearly finished actually working on the video. It's taken me that long. So, do Star Trek games suck? Let's find out. So, the video games that I will be covering in this video is Star Trek Strategic Operations for the Atari 2600, Star Trek The Next Generation for both Game Boy and original NES. I'm covering both versions. And then we're going to be covering the Star Trek Generations Game Boy game. And I'll be covering the Star Trek Borg PC game, because it's me. If you're new here, I love the Borg. The Borg are my favorite villain in Star Trek, so of course I'm going to incorporate that into this video. And then the final section of the video is going to be about Star Trek Online. So, as I stated, for most of these, except for Star Trek Online, I will be emulating them, because that's the only way that I can, because I don't own an Atari 2600. Yes, I do have a TV that could potentially, play 2600s if I use a converter or some shit, but I won't have, the only way that I could then record, um, actual gameplay footage is, if I actually had a capture card to do that. So that's why there is a game that I own that I'm not going to be covering, but I'm going to get into that. So yes, sit back and enjoy this video. If you want to skip about, there should be chapters in the description of this video. And yeah, stick around to the end of this video, because I will be announcing as well what the next big video will be. So let's get back into the actual, scripted side of things, and not the whatever this is. So before I get into covering the games, I do want to talk about some of my early memories with Star Trek video games. Mainly just two. So the first one was on PlayStation 1, Star Trek Invasion. Now, as a kid, I wasn't a Star Trek fan. That happened much later on, but I did have some knowledge. Well, not necessarily knowledge. I knew of Star Trek because my mother was a massive Star Trek fan. She brought me to see Star Trek Nemesis when it came out in cinema, and I remember watching an episode of TNG um, that was on it, like recorded on a VHS tape that my mom had. That was supposed to be George of the Jungle. The Brendan Fraser George of the Jungle. Um, so those are my only real memories of uh, Star Trek before I became a fan. You see, because like back then, my mother was somewhat of a gamer for Star Trek Invasion. So I do remember playing a little bit of it on the PlayStation 2, but I just remember not knowing what the fuck to do. So that's as vague as my memory goes. I remember seeing a sun and trying to get to the bottom of space, thinking that there was an actual bottom of space. Yeah, I know, I was stupid. Things haven't changed since I was a kid. I'm still an idiot now. So would I ever get it again and give it another go? Maybe if I ever get my hands on a PS2 again, I might consider getting it. But there are other PlayStation 2 Star Trek games that I would kind of want to get my hands on before that. The main one being Star Trek Voyager Elite Force, which is, you play, it's kind of like Doom, the video game Doom, but Star Trek, fighting the Borg. So, of course, it's Borg. I'm going to want to go for it. We now jump to when I was a teenager with the Xbox 360, and I forget how I came across this, but obviously by this time I was a Star Trek fan. The game I remember, and I own a copy of it, not my original copy, um, is a game called Star Trek Legacy. So, yeah, fans are clamoring for a Star Trek Legacy. Well, here it is in video game form, made by Bethesda. Yes, the same Bethesda that has made the Elder Scrolls series as well as Fallout since Fallout 3. So that game was published in 2006. So why am I not covering this for this review? Well, because it's sadly not backwards compatible with the Xbox One. And I know I could still play it somewhat and just have an on-screen explaining it, but I also get stuck on it pretty easily. But the basic premise is, as I'll pull up from the back, 5 captains, 3 eras, 1 legacy. Yeah, so you basically play through the 5 different captains, starting in timeline order. You start off as playing as Archer with the NX-01 Enterprise being pulled from mothballs to fight the Romulans, and that's as much as I know. I don't know what happens in the Next Generation era. I don't know what happens in the DS9 era, and I don't know what happens in the Voyager era or the original series era. I almost forgot about that one. So then why don't I just go buy a capture card for my Xbox 360? Well, you see, the thing is about that is the laptop that I have, I'll mention this later on in the video, is a 4-year-old hunk of junk. Like, I've had this laptop since 2020, and if I attempted to do that, it would shoot the CPU up to 100 and make it a laggy mess. So yeah, that, and like I said, I get stuck. So if you want to learn more about the Star Trek Legacy game, YouTube is your friend. It also has a really, really good opening theme for it, and I would probably rank it as one of my favorite Star Trek themes. Now, with that being said, let's start this uh, big video off properly with the Star Trek Atari game, Star Trek Strategic Operations Simulator. I had to pause there to look at the script to make sure that I actually said it right, because I don't tend to say strategic correctly. That's just my dyslexia for you. Anyway, time to play the Atari game. So Star Trek Strategic Operations Simulator was released by Sega on the Atari 2600 and other systems in 1983, and it's based on the original series and movies, and it even had an arcade version. The Star Trek arcade version had 2 different cabinets. One was your typical stand-up model, and the other cabinet was in the style of the motion picture captain's chair, with the controls in the armrests. So the game has you control the Starship Enterprise as you go through different sectors fighting Klingons, while also keeping an eye on your shields, photon torpedoes, and warp energy. So how was this game received? Well, Electronic Games, the first gaming magazine, which ran from 1981 to 1997, stated in 1983 that Star Trek is sure to be a top grosser in the arcades this year. If you can squeeze through the crowd around the machine, you may never want to leave. Analog Computing, a magazine dedicated to the Atari 8-bit family, which ran from 1981 to 89, wrote in 84 that it sounds a lot like Star Raiders, a classic worth aspiring to. Purists will shake their head and say the first is always the best, and in this case I must agree with them, adding that the arcade version was superior. The magazine concluded that this incarnation of Star Trek probably won't impress a hardcore Atari computer gamer. In 2016, Den of Geeks, a UK and US site covering entertainment and pop culture, ranked this game as the 4th best Star Trek game. But what do I think? I like it. Now, as I said, I'm emulating this game using an Xbox One wired controller to play, so the controls are a bit finicky, or at least I think. I may need to get a better grip on them. Now, that could also just be the fact that, my laptop is a 4-year-old hunk of junk, so it definitely slowed it down whilst I was trying to screen capture some footage. Beside that, it's definitely a fun game that I could see myself playing for hours trying to beat my high score. Is it top 4 worthy? I don't know, as I haven't played all the Star Trek games, but as a first time play, I definitely enjoyed it. And that's saying something for Atari games, as many of the 2600 library aren't great games. Looking at you, Pac-Man and E.T., visually it doesn't look that bad. Yes, the Klingon ship doesn't look anything like the D7 we've seen, and I didn't even know it was the Klingons until I looked it up, though I had a feeling that it was either going to be them or the Romulans. The Enterprise herself, I can kinda see, but only when it's at the side view, but I can't really complain too much about the look of the ship, as again, this is the Atari we're talking about here. 8-bit style and all that. But yeah, as I said, I enjoyed playing the game for the first time, and I'll definitely be playing more of it, as it is a fun game. Now it's time to continue into unexplored territory as we move on to the 2 Game Boy games that will also be first time plays for me. Let's boldly go where I have not gone before with Star Trek The Next Generation on Game Boy. Star Trek The Next Generation was released in 1993 on the original Nintendo Entertainment System, Game Boy, and Sega Game Gear. The plot is you take the role of a Starfleet cadet participating in a USS Enterprise D simulation. Taking the place of Captain Jean-Luc Picard, they must embark on a series of mission-based goals and perform many tasks in form of minigames, such as diverting power to shields, transporter systems, navigation, tactical, and more. As the player successfully completes missions, they gain rank. Starting the game as an ensign, the player can be promoted to lieutenant, lieutenant commander, commander, and finally captain. Each rank has a specific password the player can input to resume the game at whatever rank the player had previously achieved. Combat missions involve fighting enemies of varying strength and number, with Talarians being the weakest and renegade Klingons being the most difficult, except for the Borg, who only appear in one mission. So how was it received? Well, Electronic Gaming Monthly, not to be confused with Electronic Gaming, which is a different magazine, did 4 reviews for the NES version and gave it a 6.5 out of 10. 2 of the 4 reviewers felt that how you control the Enterprise D was nifty but poorly explained, as well as confusing and difficult to execute during combat sections. So I tried both the Game Boy version and the NES version, and I have no clue how to play this game. I spent nearly 25 minutes between both versions trying to figure it out. I even had to look up walkthroughs just to try and figure that out, and I still couldn't, so I quit playing both versions. Then why did I pick the game, I hear you ask? Well, 2 reasons. 1, I've never played this game before and I wanted to give it a shot. And 2, content, and to pad out the video out a bit more, but mainly the first reason. So with that piss poor attempt at that Star Trek game, let's see how I fare in the next Star Trek game. Oh boy. So yeah, I gave up on this one too pretty quickly. Why? The controls. So the game opens with you on the Enterprise B, and it starts you off in a space battle with the Tholians. Yet that didn't happen in the movie, which is why this game is loosely based on the movie. Now, this game was only released on both Game Boy and Game Gear systems, with GamePro magazine panning the Game Boy version, citing the gameplay controls being the main reason they say people giving up before seeing the bulk of the game. So the controls, man, do they suck. As you're seeing, I'm trying to find what I now know to be the Tholians, and struggling to do so. The graphics on this version are horrendous, which is another factor as to why I stopped playing the game. So why don't I download a Game Gear emulator? Simply put, it's not worth it in my opinion. Gameplay is the main thing that if it's not done right, the game isn't worth playing. That's why I quit the TNG game, and it's why I'm quitting this game too. When I came up with the idea for this, I honestly didn't think it would be off to this bad of a start. Luckily, however, Star Trek Borg and Star Trek Online will save this video. I hope. So Star Trek Borg is a PC game with full motion picture, meaning that they actually shot footage for this game. It's not the first time that a Star Trek game did this, as there was a Klingon game that does the exact same thing. So in this game they reuse sets, mainly the Voyager sets, as well as the Excelsior bridge used in the Voyager 30th anniversary special Flashback. So I remember stumbling across this randomly on YouTube years ago and forgot about it until the Trek YouTuber Junkball Media did a video on it, which unlocked a long forgotten memory. And when I decided to do this video about Star Trek games, I knew I had to cover it, as it's not a bad game / movie. So the gameplay is basically multiple choice and puzzles. You either pick the right way and progress, or the way that gets you killed, or worse. Now about that story, let's cover that. So the game opens up with a subspace message warning us that the Borg have come back and are making their way to Sector 001, Earth. Then we see our ship. It's a Galaxy class, with the main hulls looking like an Intrepid class. As I said, reusing Voyager sets. We make our way to the briefing room with other cadets, and as soon as we enter, we get into trouble for being slightly late to the meeting by a random lieutenant. We get told that the ship is going to join the Armada to fight the Borg, but the captain wants all non-essential personnel off the ship, and that includes us cadets. We're given 30 minutes to pack our shit and go. But before we leave with the other cadets, the lieutenant calls us back and tells us that the captain has denied our request to stay on board the ship. She then goes on to mention that the Battle of Wolf 359, which in this game took place 10 years ago, and how she was there. We then head and start to pack our things when we pull up a datapad with an image, the image of our father who died in the Battle of Wolf 359. And that's when we hear a voice, and he appears. Q.
Temper, young man, what would your father say? How old were you when your father was killed? 9, 10 years old? And you're still not over it? Perhaps I should introduce myself. I imagine you've heard of me, though, Q. It's short for Q.
So Q offers us the chance to go back to the Battle of Wolf 359 to save our father, and gives us the chance to either stay and leave or to go back to save him. This is where the choice and gameplay comes in. If we pick the container, we stay and game over. If we pick our phaser, we get transported to the USS Righteous. Once we arrive on the Righteous, we see how it was destroyed during the Battle of Wolf 359. And Q explains that it was essentially an inexperienced security officer's fault as to why the ship was destroyed, as the officer who could have had an impact 4 hours earlier. With that, we're transported back a further 4 hours to witness Sprint's death, when a lone drone beams onto the ship. This is how Sprint dies. But that's when Q changes things. With the snap of his fingers, we are now Sprint, and we have to kill the drone with the help of Q, taking on the role of the ship's chief medical officer. With that, the timeline is changed, and we play the rest of the game as Sprint as we work on making sure the ship and our father doesn't die at the Battle of Wolf 359. After that fiasco, the captain gets a message from the admiral to head to Wolf 359 to meet with the other ships. The captain then orders Targus, one of the friends to our father, and Sprint to remove the dead drone, and just when she lifts it up, the drone springs back to life, and once again we shoot it, or rather the console it's near. This definitely kills it, but by doing so takes out Tactical B.
Please key in destination code.
Oh, thank you, my good man.
Sprint, we're waiting.
I believe you're wanted in the computer core control room. Oh, mercy. Why? Because I can.
We make our way down to the computer control room, which is just a redress of Voyager's engineering room, with the plan of rerouting the ship's control through security systems as extra precaution, and that's when we see a Borg implant on the console, when they figure out that there may be another drone on board the ship, so we have to scan for the hidden drone. After talking to our father and Targus, we get an alert that the drone is in Jeffrey's Tube 6, and the captain orders us to find it. As we move through the Jeffries tubes with our father, we pick up a trace on where the drone might have been, and our father goes to investigate, which we try to stop, but that doesn't fly, so he comes up with a way to see who goes to investigate and who stays behind, using his comm badge for us to pick which hand it's in.
I win. Watch your back.
Bad idea. You see, there is another Borg, and he's waiting in the corridor for whoever comes out first. Poor old Dad. I hope you don't feel guilty. Remember what you said. Better dead than Borg.
Kill me.
Good try, but you see the Borg are clever in their own monolithic way. They adjust. 2 hits from any phaser, and they all know how to shield themselves against that frequency. You have to adjust along with them. You did say you wanted to kill Borg, didn't you? I like the irony of it. But aren't you forgetting someone or something?
And we knock him out and change the frequency of the phaser. That's when the second drone appears and we get into a kerfuffle with it, and then our dad shoots it and takes a component we need, and it dissolves. The crew can't seem to make heads or tails of the component we took from the drone until we suggest using the implant on Targus, which she agrees to do and tells us to remodulate our shields. And somehow, as this has gone on, and as we work on remodulating the shields, the Borg cube is there firing on us, which doesn't make any lick of sense. We know the cube is heading to Earth with an assimilated Captain Picard. We know our ship is heading to Wolf 359. Yet the cube is so close by we don't even detect it until it's firing on us. I swear this is making it seem like the Battle of Wolf 359 was an inside job and Lieutenant Levy was right.
Hey, Mariner! I'm Lieutenant Levy. We went on a date last year. I don't know if you recall.
Yeah, Steve, I remember. You said Wolf 359 was an inside job.
It totally was. So, hey, I was wondering, could you give this to your mom for me? It's just a few ideas I threw together on how to decorate the captain's yacht.
Fine, whatever.
You're the best. Thanks, Mariner. Changing's not real. The Dominion War didn't happen.
We then pull the component off Targus and go unconscious, and when we wake up, the probe is still rewiring codes. So the plan is to head on to the Borg cube to find a way to stop it. While I'm bored and after taking ages to figure out what I'm supposed to do on the cube, we end up getting assimilated by the Borg, except it goes wrong. We, like Hugh and the time Janeway, Torres, and Tuvok were assimilated, have kept our human-ish consciousness and aren't a part of the collective. We make it back to the ship, stop the Borg device, and make our way to the Battle of Wolf 359 in no time at all. Like I said, this is proving that it was indeed an inside job.
It totally was.
We're told to stay back while other ships tire themselves out, and that's when we're now caught up with the beginning. But this time, since we are still assimilated, the crew don't seem to care once they know we aren't a part of the collective. The drone from the beginning shows up and we do something, and we remodulate the shields, and again the cube thinks we are destroyed, and that's when Q reveals himself and us to the crew and mentions history has this ship lost, and so then Q brings the ship forward in time, and the game ends with us heading to fight the cube that was mentioned in the beginning of the game. So what do I think of this game? Well, technically it's more of a movie than a game, with only a handful of gameplay elements such as puzzles and clicking the right thing to progress the story. If you do everything correct, you can get it finished in under an hour, with trial and error a bit longer. As a movie, yeah, it's good. I definitely enjoyed it the first time round when I found the full thing on YouTube. As for playing it, well, that's where I wish I had watched it on YouTube so I could put it at 1.5 times speed, as certain parts do drag. Now, you can play it for yourself on a web browser, upscaled to HD thanks to Owen. Now, I would recommend you look it up on YouTube to watch it, or there is an audiobook version that has someone narrating with also audio from the game, if that's more your cup of tea. With that being said, it's time for the final section of this video, Star Trek Online. So let's fly right into it. Okay, so Star Trek Online is a free-to-play MMORPG that you can play on PC, Xbox One, Xbox Series Family, PS4, and PS5. It was originally a PC exclusive, but sometime after the Xbox One and PS4 came out, it got a release there. So for this section, I will be playing on my Xbox One. This is a game that has seen constant updates, new stories, and legacy characters reprising their roles since 2010. So what is this game about? Well, you can choose which era you want to play as, either the original series era, early Disco era, post-Nemesis era, before we got Picard and the other shows post-Nemesis. Those are if you want to play as the Federation. You could also play as a Romulan in the new Romulan Republic, or you can play as a Klingon if your heart has glory, and finally you can play as the Dominion, post-Dominion War. Depending on which era you pick depends on which race you can play as. If you pick the TOS era, you are limited to human, Vulcan, Andorian, and Tellarite, but you can also create your own alien species if you want to. With Discovery era, you can only pick between human and Vulcan, or make your own alien race. With post-Nemesis, you can pick from a whole gaggle of different Federation member species, as well as some non-member species like Pakled, as an example. And you can also make your own alien species. With Romulan and Dominion, you just get the Romulan and Jem'Hadar. But with Romulan, you can also make your own species. As for Klingon, you either get to pick Klingon, both TNG look and Discovery look if you want, Gorn, Orion, Lethran, I probably butchered that, from the DS9 episode Distant Voices, Nausicaan, and like most choices, you can make your own alien if you want. For this video, I will be going over the TOS era as well as the Discovery era in a bit. I should also explain that this game does have paid features, but that's only for ships and cosmetics. You can play the game for free without having to spend any money to do so. So, about the gameplay then. Well, this game has both in-ship battles and on-the-ground combat. You're the captain of your own ship with your own bridge crew, who you can swap out whenever you please. You can also, as you level up and gain rank, increase perks to help you in battle or in gameplay. When you create your character, you choose which division you want, which does affect gameplay. Those choices are science, tactical, and engineering. During gameplay, certain options won't be available to you based on which you picked. And lastly, before I truly begin, I want to mention that I won't be covering everything about Star Trek Online, as I don't have the time nor patience to be dealing with the mandatory online missions where you have to play with other people. I prefer to play this game solo, as those are the types of games I prefer playing. Now, let's get cracking with the TOS timeline first. So for the purpose of this video, even though I have played it 1,000 times, I will be going over the tutorial of the TOS timeline. For those who have not and nor want to play Star Trek Online, as the tutorial is a sequel to the episode Galileo 7. These will be the voyages of Captain Shrin of Andoria on the USS Novaria, NCC 1560. The tutorial opens on board the Novaria as we orbit Taurus 2. As we are investigating the disappearance of a science vessel, we go to talk to the ship's captain, Captain Isaac Garrett, as he says they have located the wreckage of a crashed ship. Since we can't use transporters, we have to take a shuttle, and we are told to scan for suitable landing coordinates. We are then told that one Ensign Mirez will be joining the away mission, as she's been there before. Now, this game used someone else to voice this character, as Phyllis Douglas had sadly passed away in 2010. Once we're done that, as part of the tutorial, we have to grab a phaser and get used to the controls. Once we get after the turbo lift, we meet one of our main members of our crew, Ensign Taurus, a fellow Andorian. Once we're done with the phaser training, we make our way to the shuttle bay and meet Mirez, who isn't too pleased to be heading back to Taurus 2. Once on the planet, we split into teams to check out the wreckage. As we come across some of the wreckage, we spot what's left of a downed shuttle. Unfortunately for the person inside, it's leaking plasma. So before we help the survivor, we have to shut it off. Once it's shut off, we heal the survivor and speak to him, and that's when the inhabitants of Taurus 2 kill a red shirt. And fun fact, the audio used for the inhabitants of Taurus 2 killing the red shirt and their audio in general is pulled from the episode Galileo 7. After scaring it off, we grab some supplies and bring it back to the other survivors, and that's when we teach them how to use the phaser rifle, and we give them some pointers to use the special build-up attack. That's when Mirez comes running with the native planet species, and we scare them off. So then we head inside what's left of the ship's shuttle bay and use the same trick Scotty used in the Galileo 7 episode by electrifying the hull outside to scare off the inhabitants of the planet. After talking to Mirez, after we scare off the Taurians, she says that members of her group got kidnapped, so we make our way to rescue them. Once rescued, we make our way back, and that's when we spot Klingons and have to fight them. After dispensing of the Klingons, one dropped a datapad, and after hacking into it, we learned that it was Core who set up the false emergency broadcast to lure unexpected ships in to down them and take their resources. And yes, the Klingons here are the TOS Klingon design, not the disco ones, for those who are curious. Once back on board the ship is under attack by the Klingons as they manage to get on board, but only the engineering section of the ship. So we then have to go clear out a lab, the armory, and main engineering. This is when we shift to the ship battle side of things, as we destroy the beacon that the Klingons are using while taking out a few of their ships at the same time, as well as help a freighter. Once we assist the freighter, we get a hail from the Enterprise. We make our way to assist the Enterprise. From time to time, members of our crew will say stuff and it will appear in a little text box. But there's someone who says something that gets my attention, but I'll save that for later on. After putting a stop to Core and his operations, we are ordered back to Earth's space dock. Back on board the space dock, we can talk to the main people of the Enterprise, except for Kirk, as he's probably still on the ship. Now, Leonard Nimoy was the only original series actor to reprise their role as Spock. At this point in 2010, most of the original series actors were still alive, but they didn't recast them. They used audio clips from episodes when speaking to them, except they did recast Scotty, but it's James Doohan's son voicing Scotty, and Chris Doohan sounds just like his old man in my opinion, and he has played his father on screen somewhat in the YouTube Star Trek series Star Trek Continues. After talking to the legendary crew, we go to talk to our captain, who has now been promoted to Admiral and has given us the ship. This is the best outcome for any of the captains from Star Trek Online, as any of the Federation missions we pick, mainly Disco and Post Nemesis in 2409, the captains always get killed for us to take command. Now, with that being said, the tutorial has ended and it's time to move on to our next mission. So the next mission is just going around the starbase to find where the tailor is, change uniform if you want to, and get a shuttlecraft. While here, you can look at what ships are available for you to buy, which in this case is just the same ship we are using, the Pioneer class, which was beta canon until Season 3 of Star Trek Picard, as a Pioneer class can be seen in the Fleet Museum, a Constitution class and a Walker class from Star Trek Discovery. These cost Zen, the in-game currency, which you can buy with real-life money or exchange dilithium you get from completing missions or that you find randomly in your adventures. I already bought both the Connie class and the Walker class, so no matter how many times I start a new playthrough on either the TOS side, the Federation side, or the Discovery era side, I can buy them for free. Anyways, now it's time for our true first mission.
Ever hear of Edrin 4? Jim Kirk got into a tussle with a Gorn there, and barely lived to tell the tale. Both the Gorn and the Federation have teams there now. I'd like you to back our new people up, in case the Gorn decide to engage in a little cowboy diplomacy.
And it's another sequel mission to the Star Trek episode Arena. We are tasked to head to Edrin 4 to assist with the planet survey with the Gorn and another Federation ship. Once we arrive, we talk to the other Federation ship, the Zhang. After that, we head to be in orbit of the planet, and that's when Taurus notices something interesting, but it's gone before she can make note of it. And then we beam down with another new member of our bridge crew, a Tellarite called Scarvin. Once we beam down to the planet, we begin to scan the minerals on the planet and discover just how rich it is. But that's when we get mortar fire, and our way back to camp has been sealed off. That's when they attack the Gorn. After dealing with the Gorn, we get a hail from our ship, informing us that one of the Gorn ships was destroyed, and they blame us. With that, we work on our way to get back to camp to rescue the scientists. As we move about and deal with more Gorn, Scarvin has an idea to make a bomb to blow away to get to camp, so we go about collecting the materials just like Jim Kirk did in the episode. Once we have what we need, Scarvin and Ensign Hunter get to work on the bomb as we fend off more Gorn. Ensign Hunter looks and sounds familiar. After the bomb is set and explodes, we go about saving the camp, then head back on board the ship to assess the situation. After contacting the Zhang, which took a lot of damage from the Gorn ship, it comes back and it's our job to handle it. After the Gorn ship takes a beating and limps away, that's when we head to scan the debris from the destroyed Gorn ship. Scarvin picks up an interesting signature nearby, and after we scan it, we know who's responsible for its destruction: the Romulans. That's when the Gorn ship shows back up, and after disabling it, we present our findings and reveal the cloaked Romulan scum and fight them, destroying their ships. After that, the Gorn apologizes and hopes we can continue working on the planet with the non-aggression act back in play. And that's the end of the mission.
Good to hear from you.
To report to
I've
the
read Captain
contact and
McKinnon's
turn in the
report.
mission.
Sounds like things got a little rough on Edrin 4. Still, the diplomatic corps thinks your actions will make a difference in future talks with the Gorn. Well done.
Now on to the next mission, where we find out who this Ensign Hunter really is and why he's so damn familiar.
Starfleet hasn't heard from Deep Space Station K-13 in a while. It's in a tactically sensitive part of the quadrant, and the brass is getting concerned. Get out there, find out what you can, and render assistance if needed. And hey, be careful, okay? This could go sideways, fast.
So the third mission is yet again another sequel to a TOS episode, sort of, as it doesn't take place on the same planet like Mission 1 and 2. So we have to head to Station K3 as it hasn't been heard from in a while. K3 is stationed in the Orion sector. Once we arrive, we are immediately attacked by two ships that were sent here to patrol the sector. Both are Pioneer class. After disabling them, we scan K-13 and don't find anything too suspicious, so we beam down. No one is there to greet us, and the lights are dimmed. There's a life sign in the med bay, so we go to investigate, and we meet who will be our final member of our crew, a Vulcan science officer, Temet. She talks about how people have been acting odd and that their adrenaline is maxed out. And it's here that we learn what's causing it. It's the pancake-looking parasites from the Season 1 finale, Operation Annihilate, that took the life of Kirk's brother Sam. We use the comms to see if anyone else has not been taken over, and there is. It's Scotty. So after Temet inoculates us so we won't fall under the parasite's control, we make it down to Scotty and inoculate him. We then leave so Scotty can repair some of the damage those infected caused, and we make our way back to engineering to activate the UV light, as that's what will kill the bastarding parasites. Except it doesn't work, so we have to head to the bridge of K-13 in order to see who's stopping it. And when we get there, we see a bunch of people, a species I've seen before in Star Trek Enterprise. It's the Nakul, a species Captain Archer encountered who tried to change the timeline during the temporal Cold War. And after defeating some of the Nakul agents, that's when Ensign Hunter reveals himself to be Daniels, the guy who helped Archer whenever the temporal Cold War came the way of the NX-01. We then use the station's UV lights to kill the parasites and then head back to the ship as the USS Ptolemy is under attack from the Nakul. And so we then help the other two ships who had the parasites on board, and we attack the ship, but aren't doing any damage. That's when Scotty has a bright idea and hits the ship with an ion burst to disrupt the temporal shields the Nakul have, and this causes them to be sent back to where they came from. But unfortunately, it has opened a time tunnel of sorts and is dragging K-13 into it, so we quickly head back and beam everyone onto our ship from the station. As the station heads into the time tunnel thingamajig, we get a few distress signals from K-13, meaning not everyone made it out. Daniels tries to reassure us that we did the best we could, and with that he leaves. And Scotty catches a ride on a different ship back to the Enterprise, and thus ends the third mission as captain.
Let me get this straight. K-13, an entire space station, just disappeared into some type of spatial anomaly? And I thought some of Kirk's after-action reports were a little out there. Starfleet Command won't be pleased with the loss of K-13, or the people that were still on board. But they'll be happy to hear about the lives you did save. Good work out there. Keep it up. We have a problem at Babel. Caridian rebels have taken several Federation trade officials hostage. They're threatening to kill them unless the UFP withdraws from the Corridan sector. I'd like you to work with the negotiation team and try to resolve this peacefully.
Okay, so mission 4 is a short one, and is another mission based off of an episode of TOS. This time, it's Journey to Babel, Season 2, Episode 10, but with a time-traveling twist. So after arriving at Babel, Daniel gives us that talk he owes us and informs us that we will be going back in time to the events of said episode, as the Nakul are messing with time. But we won't be doing this alone. That's when Captain Chekhov shows up, voiced by Walter Koenig, and unlike William Shatner, I actually remember his name.
Would you open this curtain? There you go. The cast of Star Trek. George Takei.
Well, hello. Good to be here.
Nichelle Nichols.
My pleasure, Admiral, Captain.
And the gentleman who plays Chekhov.
Walter Koenig. Здравствуйте, товарищи, как путеваете?
That was the interested Jimmy Doohan.
Here stays and was like a sky few and there are deed.
Anyways, we're sent back in time and have to head to the bridge to alter the sensors to scan for the Nakul. Once done, we have to make our way to the conference and scan people in attendance. And that's when a scene from the original episode plays out using the dialogue from that episode when a Tellarite walks up to Sarek. Once we have scanned everyone, we return back to Captain Chekhov and head out to search for the Nakul. We find one after it's killed the Tellarite ambassador, and we find the second one after Kirk is knocked out, but this time he's in worse condition. So we heal him up a bit before McCoy can arrive. Once Kirk has been seen to, we make our way to engineering. The Nakul have placed a time bomb, so we work on making sure that the Enterprise doesn't blow up. So, typical shenanigans on the Enterprise. That's when an Orion ship shows up, and we have to then beam on board to stop the Nakul there, using the time bomb to blow up the Orion ship. And that's when history plays out as it should, and we're sent back to our proper timeline. Like I said, quick mission. The last two missions are not based on any episodes.
That was close. I'm glad I got you out of there in time. You're both valuable agents. Of course, no one will know what you've done today, with the exception of Commander Scott. That being said, this won't be the strangest thing he'll see in his career. Not by a long shot. Indeed. Comes with the job, I'm afraid. In the meantime, I can send you and Captain Chekhov back to your respective timelines when you're ready.
That was quite an adventure. I think you have the makings of a fine temporal agent, my friend. As good as it was to see Enterprise again, I have other duties to attend to. We're preparing for a very serious event, the Battle of Procyon 5. That conflict will determine the... but you don't need to worry about that now. Enjoy your time on the frontier of yesteryear, a time that will never come again.
A lot could have gone wrong today. We could have lost critical figures in history. Sarek of Vulcan, James Kirk, and the crew of the Enterprise. The list is long. However, the timeline was preserved, thanks to you and Captain Chekhov. The Babel Conference proceeds as planned, and Corridan is admitted to the Federation. Well done. I'll continue to monitor the timeline for incursions. I hope I can count on you again when the time comes for action.
They're heating with the Tholians. Monitor stations are detecting large fleet movements toward Federation space, and they're refusing all of our diplomatic hails. We're doing all we can to prevent a war, but it's not looking good. I want you to join a task force I'm assembling. If this goes south, I want my best people on the front line when it does.
The Federation shouldn't be having significant issues with the Tholians at this point in time. I've been scanning the timeline and I think I've found the problem. 2 years ago, a Tholian colonial fleet was destroyed. The Tholians blamed the Federation, and increasing hostilities have ultimately led us here. This is something I'll need your help to correct.
Okay, so I told a little white lie. In my defense, it's been a while since I played Star Trek Online, especially the TOS timeline, so cut me some slack. So the 5th mission is related to a TOS episode, and it technically explains something from the original series that was already explained, but done in a different way. Allow me to explain. So, the USS Defiant that went missing from Prime Timeline into the Mirror Universe timeline, it shows up in this mission, and it has to do with the Tholians, where the Defiant shows up to help a Tholian hatch ship with a Tholian queen and her hatchlings on being attacked by the Nakul, so we arrive after traveling back in time and assist both the Defiant and the Tholians. We beam on board the Tholian ship and deal with the Nakul, but unfortunately, we are too late for the younglings, as the Nakul straight up Anakin them. After dealing with the Nakul and talking to the Tholian Queen, trying to explain that we are here to help, we then head back to our ship to defend the Tholian ship from the Nakul, so the Tholian Queen can signal her people. Once the Queen has gotten her message off, and the Defiant's engines being banjaxed to all hell, the Tholian Queen decides to ram her ship into the Nakul, destroying both ships. And because of the engine damage, the Defiant couldn't escape the shockwave, thus sending it into a phage between dimensions, like how the Enterprise found it in the Tholian web. Now, as I said, STO is beta canon, so while yes, it does explain how the Defiant ended up like that, it doesn't take away from the fact that it was the Mirror Universe Tholians doing some shenanigans shits that dragged it into the Mirror Universe.
Captain Archer had similar concerns when I worked with him. We often disagreed, but in the end, we were able to work past our differences and do the right thing. I hope you and I can do the same. Leaving Defiant to her fate was a hard choice, but it saved untold billions of lives. That has to count for something.
We have a situation in the Caleb system. The Klingons are massing a battle fleet in that sector, and it's pointed at Federation space. I'm leading a force to respond to this aggression, and I want you to be a part of it. If they cross the line, we need to be ready for anything.
With that being said, let's get on to the final TOS timeline mission. So the Admiral contacts us saying shit's about to go down at Caleb 4 with the Klingons. The Klingons are massing a fleet at that sector, so we gather a bunch of ships to deal with them. Once we arrive, we deal with the Klingons, but that's when one of them leads us to a ambush as a bunch of Klingon ships decloak and immediately fire on our party, cutting us off. Daniel says he's picking up traces of Nakul on one Klingon ship and rigs away for us to beam over. Once there, we plant some charges and head to disable the tractor beam when we overhear a conversation between Core and Future Guy from Enterprise. He's been the one who's behind all of this with the Nakul, which is weird since if Enterprise had gotten a season 5, Future Guy would have been Archer. After fighting with the Klingons and the Nakul, we beam back to our ship and begin to help our friends, who are still trapped by the tractor beams. Once freed, we have to fend off the Klingons while we let the others escape. Doing so, unfortunately, seals our fate. When the last ship has left, the Klingons rain hell on us, and she's destroyed. We died. Or so that's what the history books say. Daniel saved as many as he could and is going to rescue us and is going to recruit us as temporal agents and sends us to the year 2409, the 25th century. Once there, we are to speak with the Admiral of Earth Space Dock after we change uniform to something of this century. With the new uniform, we head to speak with the Admiral, who gives us a token to buy a new Tier 2 ship. The choices are between a refit Constitution class, a ship class that I don't remember, and the Nova class. I picked the Nova class and renamed it the USS Novara, NCC 1560-A. This will be our new ship for the moment as we explore the 25th century. But before we do, how about we have a look at the Discovery timeline?
I still can't believe how much things have changed. We hadn't heard from the Klingons for years. And now we have. Now, the Federation's at war. That was probably the last thing on my mind when I got here. It was the same for you, right? We came to Starfleet Academy to become explorers. Not all of us are fighters. Some of us are engineers, healers, scientists. We've been working hard on the ground and in space. We learned how things worked on a starship, and we learned how to work as a team. We've been getting ready to boldly go where no one has gone before. And today's your big day. Today you graduate and begin your career as a Starfleet officer. It's gonna be amazing.
Okay, so the Discovery timeline. Why am I also covering this in the video? Because it's been a while, and I think I only played through it once. And I love Discovery. As I said in my Season 5 review of Discovery, I am a Discovery apologist. However, the tutorial part of this, God, I forgot how long it is. You see, you all have the luxury of watching the footage sped up, but it took me nearly an hour and a half just to get through, which honestly felt like 2 hours. So let's begin with our new character, Monty Kai, captain of the USS Excalibur NCC 1623, a Malachowski class ship. And to be honest, I don't hate the look of her. It's given a mix of Centaur class and Miranda class from the motion picture /TNG/DS9 era. So basically, it's a few months after the Battle of the Binary Stars from the first 2 episodes of Disco, and we are part of the graduating class of 2256, and we meet up with Cadet Tilly, who will later be stationed on Discovery, and is the only character to be a part of your crew from the show for a time. 2 people that get mentioned in this section on Starfleet Academy are Finnegan and Jim Kirk. Now, looking up Finnegan on Memory Alpha, there may or may not be a bit of a continuity error here. We do know from the episode Shore Leave that they were in the Academy at the same time, but Memory Alpha has assumed that because in the episode he calls Jimmy Kirk a pleb, that meant Kirk was a first-year cadet and Finnegan wasn't. But in this, they're both graduating at the exact same time. Now, I'm probably reading too much into this, as again, Star Trek Online is beta canon. Anywhoosies, we go talk to Captain Schaefer to find out where we're going to work on the cadet cruise, and after doing some phaser training, we are made first officer. With that, we give a speech to the graduating cadets of our ship and head to the ship via shuttlecraft. Along the way to our ship, we see a Crossfield class in dry dock. It's the sister ship of the Discovery, the USS Glenn, NCC 1030. Once on board, we head to the bridge and head out of dry dock and start to make our way to Vulcan. En route, we receive a distress call from a SS Fortuna, and since we are the only ship close by, typical, we change course to help out. This turns out, however, to be a trap. When we arrive and try to beam survivors over, we end up accidentally beaming Klingons on board. With them on board, messing up our ship, we are tasked to head and lend a hand, as well as unlock the weapon storage for phaser rifles. We then fight off a bunch of Klingons and then have to head to engineering to help Tilly. Once the Klingons are dealt with, we work on getting the ship in decent operational order by using an option that is only available to tactical. We then head to the bridge, but we are too late as a Klingon named Jaula beams on board asking about some classified files and then beams back to her ship with the captain. She then hails us and has the captain order us to send the files, but he then orders us to lock on to him and fire, which we do, but whilst talking, Jaula then kills the captain. We are now the captain since we are the XO. We try to contact the Fortuna, and we do, and it's a familiar face. Fucking Cyrano Jones. The SOB with the tribbles in the TOS and the animated series episodes that feature them. We help repair his ship, and he escapes like the Targ he is. We then scavenge some parts to help our ship, as we're in a bad way, and set out to destroy the Klingons' jamming beacon so we can get a distress call out. Now, I should mention, Jaula is the sister of Takuvma and the leader of the House Mokai. Again, this is beta canon, but Jaula is the main antagonist for the Disco timeline. Eventually, we fight and destroy some Klingon ships, and that's when a Starfleet vessel shows up. It's the USS Sabrova, a Shepherd class, and her captain, I'm probably going to butcher this, Taikrin Shran. And yes, he is voiced by Jeffrey Combs. So he is the great grandson of the Shran we see in Enterprise, and through dialogue we learn he served with our former Captain Schaefer, as well as he toured the USS Shran, which was a McGee class ship and was destroyed at the Battle of Binary Star. Anyway, enough info dumping about other stuff. Let's get back to the story. So explain our side of the story to Shran, and as we are talking, Jaula appears and attacks the Sabrova, but then leaves. That's when Shran gives us the official field promotion to captain and asks us to accompany him as he looks for another ship that hasn't been heard from in a while, so we head to investigate. We arrive and locate the Tichondria, which I'm not going to have fun trying to pronounce when recording this audio. We then explain our story to Captain Durant, who then asks us to check on the probes she sent out after doing something with tachyons. We reveal more Klingons and fight them. Once dealt with, we then have to immediately head for the Corvan system, which has a planet used to mine dilithium. So we race there and beat the Klingons there, but not for long, as when we try to get the planet to evacuate, they show up. So we defend the freighters as they escape, then have to beam down to the planet to fend off the Klingon ground forces. As we're fighting the Klingons, we meet a new member of our crew, who I'm not going to name them like I did in the TOS timeline, because once I'm finished with this, I'll be going back to that character to continue, so it's not really important. We eventually get a shield up around the mine and repel the Klingons on the planet, so we beam up to the ship and have to fight a wave of Klingons. Then Shran shows up with a bunch of ships to assist us. After dealing with the Klingons where he was, with the other ship, he made it back to inform Starfleet and get reinforcements. One of them is the USS Glenn. We then defeat the Klingons and make it back to Earth and explain everything to Admiral Kingston, who makes our promotion to Captain legit because the Federation is at war and they need captains like us on the front lines. And that is that. That was the tutorial for the STO Disco missions. And fuck me, I'm never doing that again. Even typing this out towards the end, I just wanted it to be done. So with that, let's move on to Mission 2.
Our victory at Pryor's World was hard fought, and we took a thrashing in the process. We've gained some momentum from this win, but our position at Pryor's could become tenuous if the Klingon should return for a rematch. Captain Gabriel Lorca of the USS Buran is on station at Pryor's World, and he's requested assistance while they handle mop-up operations there. I believe you and your crew are ready for action, yes? Lorca is a fine captain, tough but fair, with years of experience in the field. Follow his lead and you'll do well. Report to him at Pryor's World for further instructions. Kensington out.
So Mission 2 is an interesting one, as we have to head to Pryor's World to rendezvous with Captain Gabriel Lorca. So we arrive and deliver some supplies to the other two ships before we get to the Buran and beam over to the ship. I should mention that Lorca is voiced by Jason Isaacs, and when we beam on board we also meet Landry, who is voiced by, and I apologize for me butchering this, is voiced by Rekha Samara. Again, I apologize for butchering that. So the Buran is having issues as a virus has spread through their systems, and we have to try and purge the systems. So we have to try and purge the virus from the systems, so we can bring the POWs to where they need to go. This, as expected, didn't go to plan, as the shields do drop and Klingons beam over to free their comrades. We eventually put a stop to this before they manage to steal a shuttle and decide that it's best to bring the prisoners in my ship, as my ship isn't compromised. I should also mention that Landry is the first officer of the Buran, which was mentioned by Ted Sullivan on episode 12 of After Trek. Ted is an executive producer on season 1 and 2 of Disco. And we meet Landry's fiancée, Chief Security Officer Amana Patel. I probably butchered that. This is important later on. So Landry accompanies us to where we need to go, which is a Federation prison with the Klingons. And after getting onto the station of sorts, before talking to the warden, Landry warns us that he likes to do things that normally don't fly with the Federation, but have been requested and approved Admiralty. As we walk with the wardens and some of our crew, and the Klingons, and a Klingon who looks like Garon, we learn that the systems here are starting to go haywire, and after Disco Garon, as I'm gonna call him, nearly dies, we head back to processing, when the Klingons beam on board to liberate the others. We also figure out that the reason for this virus is because of the medical scans on some of the Klingons, as they have some way to pass it through the systems. Clever, really. Unfortunately, as we are back in processing, Jaula shows up and takes back the prisoner Garon looking SOB, and the warden works on getting the shields back up. So we have to fend off Klingons so he can do his thing. Once done, we head back to our ship, but that's when we learn that the defense systems around the area have been compromised to basically attack us because of the virus. So we have to avoid them while attacking Klingon ships. Eventually the prison systems are purged and the Klingons leave. And that's the end of this mission, or rather part 1 to this mission. So let's see how this one ends.
Sounds like the Klingons are making another push in that sector. Securing Pryor's World is of the utmost importance, so I want you to render assistance to the Buran as soon as possible. I'm sending other vessels in the region to join the effort, but until they arrive, the burden will fall on your shoulders alone. Good luck and Godspeed. Kensington out.
This Klingon computer virus is giving me a bad feeling about things. With Jaula and House Mokai involved, I think we're looking at a serious new effort to capture or destroy high-value Starfleet targets, ships, personnel, even entire planets. Let's rendezvous with the Baran as fast as we're able. That virus is already in her systems, and after what we just dealt with, I'm guessing the Klingons aren't done with my ship just yet.
So we make it back to Pryor's world, and the Baran is under attack by the Klingons, and before we make it to the Baran, things happen and it's destroyed, but before it goes kaboom, a shuttle manages to escape with just one person on board. It's Lorca. Mirror Lorca. So after dealing with the Klingons, we need to bring Lorca to anywhere for medical treatment via shuttle, but unfortunately a Klingon ship shows up and forces us to crash land on a planet. We all survive. It's us and 2 members of our crew and the surviving crew from the Baran. Landry, Patel, Lorca, a random Andorian, and the chief engineer. We make for a cave for better cover. This feels like a lot of Star Trek episodes where the shuttle goes down on a random planet and we have to hold off until we can get a distress beacon off. And that's what happens. We stay for 3 days until it's ready, but once it activates, the Klingons know exactly where we are, and we have to fight them. During this, everyone who isn't important dies. The chief engineer, the random Andorian, and Landry's fiancée all die before we are rescued. Then it cuts to a few months later with Landry on the Discovery, taking up the chief security officer role we see her have in the show.
Personal log, Commander Ellen Landry. She's been gone for months, and every day I'm reminded of her. I even have her job now, Chief of Security. I took it to honor her, to continue her work, to keep people safe. The captain's recovered from his injuries, mostly. His eyes don't handle the light very well. But like me, he forges on. This war, the Klingons, they've taken so much from us both. For me, for the captain, only duty remains.
Long-range sensors are picking up Klingon raiders in this sector. Ready for a little payback?
Always.
Basically, these 2 missions are to flesh out a bit of Landry's character, as well as show us how Mirror Lorca came into Prime Timeline. Now, do I care about these random characters that are killed off in this mission? No, because not enough time was spent with them for me to care. Yes, during the 3 days you are on the ice planet, you can talk to them and get them to fill out their backstory, but at this point, playing the mission, I was getting burnt out from playing Star Trek Online. Moving on to the next mission.
It's over. You did what you could. We all did. This time it wasn't enough. Not for everyone. I've heard from the surgeons at Starfleet Medical. They're optimistic about the captain's recovery. Though it's looking like he might have permanent damage to his eyes. Could have been a lot worse. They let me speak to him for a while, and he asked me to pass his thanks along to you. I'm glad he's still with us. We're gonna need officers like him to get through this war. Officers who are willing to do what must be done to stop the Klingons, no matter what the cost.
We have a situation at the Delta Volanus cluster. One of our research stations there managed to get a partial distress signal off before it was jammed at the source. I need you to get out there and get eyes on the situation. The Klingons are getting bolder since they acquired cloaking technology, but an attack that far into Federation space is bold, even for them. Find out what's going on and render any assistance they might need at the station, if it still exists.
So the second to last mission from the Disco timeline has us heading to a space station that was attacked by Klingons. And whilst this is going on, the Klingons are attacking Starbase 1. Anyway, we assist the space station, and that's when the USS Glenn shows up and helps us. That's what the Klingons wanted, mainly House Mokai. So we have to beam over to the Glen and help repel the unwanted guests. After assisting on the bridge, we make our way to engineering. We see the tardigrade and Jaula behind a force field, as she is trying to steal the top secret data about the spore drive. She does get it, but not all of it, and she escapes via shuttle, and that's the end of the mission. It's an okay mission, but let's get on to the final mission and my overall problems with the Disco Timeline missions.
I'm not thrilled with the Klingons getting away with some of our cutting-edge research, but Stroll's report indicates they won't be able to do much with it for quite some time, if ever. Hopefully the Glen will be able to track down Jaula and recover the data before they return to Klingon space. It should go without saying that what you witnessed at Delta Volanus is classified at the highest level. The Klingons know too much as it is. Good work out there. Kensington out. Starbase 1 has been attacked by the Klingons. Though they have repelled the first wave of attack, it is highly likely that more Klingon forces will resume the assault soon. We need you to assist Starbase 1 and defend it from Klingon attack immediately.
So, the final mission has us race to Starbase 1 and assist with saving the crew of a few ships that are here to help. Those ships are the USS Churchill, USS Cardiff, USS Vancouver, and USS Macedonia. All these ships are Eagle class ships, and in game they all have the same NCC number of 1003. When we get everyone off these ships, the Admiral orders us to destroy these ships so the Klingons don't get their hands on any technology. After this, we have to fend off the Klingons, and after some time, two ships show up that we had dealings with before. It's the ships we first met during the tutorial. One of the ships has a Captain Shran on it, so it's nice to see him again. We have to fend off the Klingons so the ships in dry dock of Starbase 1 can escape. And that's when Jaula shows up and attempts to fire a weapon made from the stolen information she got from the Glen using the mycelium network. But this backfires and sends her and a few House Mokai into the future, the 25th century to be precise. This is what also happens to us, but we wake up in the temporal ready room of Daniels, as he explains that history has us listed as dead and recruits us as temporal agents to stop Jaula. Now, I hate how this ends because Daniels just appears out of nowhere, and if you aren't familiar with him from Enterprise or by playing the TOS timeline, and this is where I think the TOS timeline done it better, because in that we see Daniels as early as the tutorial as a member of our crew, and it's not until a few missions later that he makes himself known. So you basically spend all of the TOS timeline with him, so it makes sense that then why he recruits you, because of that development you go through. But for the Disco timeline, you get 4 missions and then that's that. And they are flowing into the 25th century, and I don't like it because I get it, Star Trek Online has always focused on the 25th century, and in the TOS timeline, again, it makes sense why they bring you to it, because to come up with many storylines runs the risk of breaking canon. Overall, I don't like the Disco timeline. Whilst it has its ups, by the end of it, I was forcing myself to finish it, because at this point, I'm starting to get burnt out on Star Trek Online, which is a common thing to happen to me when I play for a good bit of time and then get burnt out due to issues I have with this game, which I'll save for the end as we are getting close to it. Okay, so I had every intentions on doing more of Star Trek Online, but the one thing I didn't take into consideration whilst working on this video the past few months is burnout. While working on the Gears of War video at the start of this year, I didn't get burnt out at all, which is why I didn't take it into a fact here, as in case you don't know, I'm autistic and I suffer burnout a lot, and it can manifest in different ways. And when it comes to Star Trek Online, it happens a lot, so much so that I will go months or even a year without playing because I simply get burnt out, and it's because Star Trek Online is not designed right for the Xbox One. And I've been having these issues since 2016, where the game will lag and glitch constantly. Examples of these lags and glitches are as follows. Number 1, trying to make a new profile and moving between different options takes ages. 2, trying to change uniform again takes fucking ages because it's so goddamn slow on the Xbox. 3, glitching floors. 4. While firing a phaser or a rifle, it keeps firing even after I've stopped pressing the button to do so, meaning I can't hear the dialogue. And 5. Locking onto a target, the amount of times it decides to lock onto one of my members of the away team instead of a fucking enemy is atrocious. I'm not saying Star Trek Online is a bad game. It's arguably the best Star Trek game we have and will ever get, because the team behind it clearly loves the franchise and wants to give the fans their own Star Trek experience. Not only that, there are a few MMO RPGs that are still around and are still giving updates to this day. But because the Xbox port has been the worst, I just can't play it for long periods of time without getting burnt out due to the issues I just listed. It's been weeks since I last worked on the script and had every intentions on continuing for a bit further, and had some parts scripted out and had planned to push this video back a month just so I can get out of this funk and play it. But even after trying to do one mission on the 28th of last month, I just couldn't do it. The burnout is just too much, and I don't want to force myself to play something and then deliver a mediocre video. Have I had fun playing it? Absolutely. It's what got me to appreciate the original series, something until recently struggled to sit through, and now I have. This video didn't go the way I had hoped it would have, but to answer the question from the beginning, are Star Trek games worth it, and does Star Trek translate well to video game form? The answer is both yes and no. There are some good Star Trek games, some of which I played in this video, being the Star Trek Atari game, though I'd recommend the Atari 5600 version, as the graphics-wise, the Enterprise and the Klingon ships look the way they should, and Star Trek Online. Those are the only ones I can say I had fun with. The TNG and Generations game I played on Game Boy and NES are the worst games I've ever played. They are so goddamn confusing, even while watching a walkthrough in order to try and play them, I couldn't due to how bad they are. As for Star Trek Borg, it's more of a movie than a game. There are some gameplay elements, but I just recommend you look it up on YouTube to watch it in full rather than playing through it yourself. I'm sure there are other Star Trek games that are better than the ones I have covered in this video that you may like, but these are the ones I wanted to cover for this video. And, well, there you guys go. Another big video down, and despite it not going the way I wanted to, I still had fun experiencing these Star Trek games that I had never played before. So let me know what you thought about them if you played them in the comments down below, and I will see you all next time. And as a way to make up for the lackluster ending, here's a teaser for the next big scripted video.